Winter squash can appear intimidating at first glance, and the thought of cutting through its thick skin and dense flesh may make you want to reach for the chainsaw. However, with a few standard kitchen instruments, you can easily master the best way to cut any winter squash without fear. No lumberjack tools needed. How you approach the squash will depend on what type of squash it is. A butternut squash has thinner skin than the other varieties of winter squash, so you can peel it like you would an apple, that is with a vegetable peeler, if the recipe calls for that. You need a peeler with a sharp blade that easily glides through the peel of any fruit or vegetable. Peel the squash thoroughly in order to remove the outer layer, as well as the layer of fibrous white flesh just beneath the visible peel. A sharp, well-balanced chef's knife is essential when working with winter squash. This is very important. If your knife is not sharp, slicing through squash will be difficult and dangerous, since a dull knife could slip as you're slicing. Equally important is keeping your hand clear of the knife blade when cutting, which is why a rubber mallet is also necessary to force the knife through the squash. More on that in just a moment. To cut through the squash safely, set it on a damp kitchen towel to hold it in place. This is a good habit to get into when working with any squash, but it's especially useful with rounder squash that might roll around, such as an acorn squash. Position your chef's knife in the middle of the squash or where the neck meets the bulbous end for butternut squash. Strike the back of the knife with a rubber mallet to drive the knife into the squash, and continue to hit the knife with the mallet until the knife cuts through the squash. This method ensures that your fingers don't accidentally get caught under the blade. Alternatively, you can use a bench scraper and a mallet to cut through the squash by striking the mallet on the handle of the bench scraper. If you're working with a winter squash like an acorn squash, you're ready to remove the seeds and fibers after making this initial cut. A regular old dinner spoon will do the job just fine. You can roast the seeds if you like with a little oil, salt, and pepper on a rim baking sheet for 10 to 15 minutes in a 350-degree oven. Our tasters actually found that roasted acorn squash seeds have the best flavor out of any type of squash seeds. If you're working with butternut squash, you should have two pieces after making that initial slice, the neck and the bulbous end. To get the seeds, turn the bulbous end cut side down to create a stable edge and cut it in half. Remove the seeds and fibers and discard them or save them for another use. There's a lot of intense flavor in the pulp and seeds of the vegetable, so we try to incorporate it into our winter squash recipes whenever possible, rather than let it go to waste. For instance, we found that the core of the butternut squash provides a rich flavor for the base of our silky butternut squash soup. After scraping out the seeds, cut each piece into the size your recipe calls for. Whatever size pieces you cut your squash into, it's important to have a flat, stable surface to work with. The two halves of an acorn squash or the bulbous half of the butternut squash already have nice flat surfaces, so it will be easy to cut each half into wedges if that's what your recipe calls for. However, you'll have to do a little extra work for the neck of the butternut squash. To get a nice long flat surface with this piece of squash, slice off a thin layer lengthwise. This stable surface will allow you to safely slice it into planks, pieces, or whatever size your recipe specifies. If you follow these tips, there's no need to be afraid of cutting and preparing winter squash.
Thanks for watching America's Test Kitchen. What'd you think?
Well, leave a comment and let us know which recipes you're excited to make, or you can just say hello.
You can find links to today's recipes and reviews in the video description.
And don't forget to subscribe to our channel.
See you later.
I'll see you later.